everybody. My name is Genifer. Thank you all so much for coming. You're currently at Evergreen Cemetery, and I'm the volunteer manager here with Enrichmond Foundation. And our goal is to serve the people, parks, and public spaces in the city of Richmond. So what we do as the stewards of this space, because although we own the space, we don't deem it fair to say that we own other people, because that's just not fair. That's what has been done for so long. So we actually call ourselves stewards of this great cemetery, okay? Evergreen Cemetery was established in 1891 by leaders of Richmond's African American community. You all entered into East End Cemetery that was established in 1897, also by leaders of Richmond's African American community, mainly from the Jackson Ward area. Okay, so I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the Jackson Ward area, downtown Richmond. Most of the people that are buried here in the tour area that I'm going to take you today, they are mostly from the Jackson Ward area. So what's really amazing is that the African Americans that are buried here, especially in this area, they believe strongly in family, community, and unity. So they never wanted to be separated, even in death, which is really amazing. So they chose to be buried together. A lot of these plots were pre-sketched, pre-written. So you had a lot of people that were even at birth given death burial plots to this cemetery, because it was really that important at that time. You wanted to be buried at Evergreen Cemetery. So the place came from a great legacy of African Americans just wanting a place to call their own, because a lot of people don't know, but African American cemeteries were not given the same funding, state or federal, that other race cemeteries were given. So what that means is that the cemetery had to be cared for with personal resources by private owners, okay? So what happened is the cemetery never had what is called perpetual care. And perpetual care is something specifically for these spaces where you have a plan that you've done it so long of keeping a space like this clean. Because the tricky part is you're not just taking a lawnmower and mowing through a space. You have to be very, very careful. You can do certain spots, but then people have to come through with weed eaters because you have so many markers and headstones, okay? So with it being such a sacred space, it makes you wonder, well, how did we get to here? How did we get to a place of being overgrown and the cemetery needing places like Enrichmond to come in and revamp it? So as I said, they did not receive the same funding. The owners who were the Ensmingers, it started with, well, okay, it's 10 of us. We can handle this whole property. Just a generic number, but let's just think about it. As people started to pass away and people move on to other jobs, you don't have the same capacity as you had before. So you went from, I can do 90 acres to, well, let me try 60. Let me try 50. Before you know it, you're only handling that middle loop, that 1 acre where people are still being buried. So we've had family members come in and tell us, hey, I buried my family member here, but when I came to bury, I was surrounded with trees. So that's why I say, imagine coming to bury your loved one and know I may not be able to come back. But that's when you get a chance to think about the significance of this space. It was so important to be buried here, and people knew that their family was here, where that was okay. It's like, I'd rather be here with my family than be separated from my family. So a lot of people ask, well, why were people still buried? It doesn't make sense. It does make a lot of sense. Like, don't you want to be where your family is too? And unfortunately, a lot of neglect happened. And so people are very aware of African American cemeteries being neglected. So it wasn't like you can say, well, matter of fact, forget it. I'm gonna go to this cemetery, because it happened a whole lot throughout this area and many other areas, okay? So unfortunately, around the 70s, you know, a part of it, the 70s were wild. A lot of stuff happened. And one of the main things that happened was the neglect of this space, the terrible things that happened out of here, mainly for people trying to get into the KKK, all these white supremacy groups. One of the things they did was, hey, let's go desecrate the cemetery. Let's go rip this thing apart. And unfortunately, another big part of it was grave robbing, and I'm gonna tell y'all more about that. So a lot of that happened around in the 70s. When I tell you, even when I started working here, prostitution, guns, drugs, it all happened. One of our very first volunteers here, Miss Veronica, she was one of the first people to start coming out here. She was actually threatened with a gun and told that she needs to stop coming here because she has started coming and cleaning with her sons. Her sons were this big. One of them is an adult now, okay, in his early 20s in college. So it shows you how dedicated, for one, a volunteer can be to this space, but how volunteerism can change things. Because once people start to realize, oh, there are people out there. It's a Thursday afternoon. It's 3:30. What are they all doing here? Eventually, they started turning backwards and people stopped coming here. Not only that, but we had to bring the police in because people aren't just scared of us, they'll threaten us. But if the police are here, so it's, you know, of course, people are gonna go the other way. So the main point of restoring this space, the reason we're all out here, the reason we all do the work is to reconnect families, okay? It's not we're just cleaning up a park, no. We're reconnecting the families because even when you think about the area we cleaned today and you found that headstone, it was not visible at first. So that could be somebody's family that says, well, but I think it's supposed to be over there. Well, now they found a piece to their puzzle. I told you I've seen that other piece before. It's somewhere. So now I have it in my head. It goes somewhere. I know it does. I just have to remember where it is because I've seen all this stuff so many times. So the significance and the history of this sacred place and being able to tell the families, you know what? You were looking for your family member a year ago. Guess what? We found them. I've experienced so many tears, y'all. Y'all don't know, a lot of times when talking about this place, I'm trying not to cry. I've gotten used to it now, like, hold it in, because it's so touching to see somebody who could not visit their mother, like, oh my gosh, there's my mom. I've got to tell you, Christine, last time y'all were here and we had that big dinner, you all didn't notice, but a guy was looking for his family, right? And he came and got me. I walked away. And my guy, Kareem, he was like, Genifer, he said he's looking for his mom. And, you know, he was just explaining it to me. And so I went to the gentleman. He was like, well, y'all took my mom's headstone. Because you can understand people being angry, upset, because they don't know what's going on. Like, usually when I come here, I know I can't see the headstone, but at least I know which area it is. So he would get his chair and he would sit by a certain tree, because that's the tree he remembered when he was little and his mom passed. And so I asked him what year. All this stuff is in order by year. All the deaths are in order by year. So I helped him find his mom and I left him be that particular day. And I walked away. And when he came back, he told me, he said, I left some stuff on the table for you all, for the volunteers. He said, I'm so thankful. I haven't been able to see my mom in years. He said, I'm so thankful. Y'all, he bought hundreds of dollars worth of snacks and put them on the table. All he said was, I got something for y'all. And he just walked away. So it wasn't for a thank you. It wasn't, I spent all this money. And that's how we're changing lives, you know? People, it's hard to part people with their money. So when they start doing that, you know you've done something right, you know? I want to take you all just on 3 different sites out here because I really want the future volunteers, current, everybody to understand the significance of why we're doing what we're doing, and just to get an understanding of how important the history is out here. So this current spot here is the burial site of Miles and Sarah Garland Boyd Jones, okay? Miss Sarah Garland Boyd Jones became the first African American woman to pass the Virginia Medical Examining Board examination. Jones grew up among Richmond's black elite to become a teacher upon graduating from Richmond Colored Normal School. She entered Howard University Medical School in 1890 and earned her medical degree 3 years later. Jones established a successful practice in Richmond. She and her physician husband helped create a medical association for Virginia's African American doctors, and the pair opened their own small house hospital. In 1922, the Sarah G. Jones Memorial Hospital Medical College and Training School for Nurses, which was later named Richmond Community Hospital, okay? Now, something else you all may remember is this was one of the places on the tour, and this was laid flat. I'm pretty sure it was still laying flat when y'all came last time. It took about right at $11,000 to reset this. Because you're using cranes, it's expensive. You're using cranes and you're using professional, and so what they have to do is a certain way that they have to do it professionally so we work a lot with Department of Historic Resources, okay? And so they have to approve things that we do, the method that we do it. So this is one of the places that was desecrated due to people trying to be cool. And so when I first started here, this piece was over here on the ground, and so was this piece was on the ground. But when they started stewarding the property years ago, these pieces were over there. So that's how that brick structure got knocked down, because it was yanked and knocked that way, okay? Now realize how big and heavy this stuff is. You have to have a pulley system. You have to really put in some time. If people put in more time doing smart stuff as they did dumb stuff, we'd be a lot better off, okay? So when something you'll notice at the cemeteries is you'll see a lot of bricks on plots, on family plots. You'll see OBCs, which are out of burial containers, okay? And there are different reasons for them. One of the reasons is to stop grave robbing. And like I said, not grave robbing of jewels, but of bodies for research for medical colleges. Very terrible thing, but they did it, and a lot of local colleges have admitted to doing it and have put forward resources to try to right some of their wrongs, okay? But you can't right it, but you can acknowledge what you've done, apologize, and move forward. For me, acknowledgement is the biggest thing you can do. That's better than throwing money at it, because sometimes people don't want to acknowledge that they've done these things. So for these colleges to acknowledge it, putting resources towards fixing some of their issues is amazing. So it's a lot of grants and stuff out there now that we can apply for different things. As you all probably know and have seen recently on the news, Governor Northam just signed, Governor Youngkin just signed a bill to give more resources and more money to headstones before 1940. I'm sorry if I'm saying the wrong year, but before then it was you could only get them before 1900. So each headstone before a certain year is the federal and state funding I was referring to. Other cemeteries have always received that funding. African American cemeteries did not. And now that these more African American cemeteries are coming up and say, oh, it's a cemetery back there. The years are so old where they're still not getting the support. And so you got people like Delegate McQuinn that have worked with different groups to bring more awareness to why we need older years to make sure that we can support these kind of sacred spaces. So like I said, you have your brick here. When I started, you all, and you can still see this line, this was slanted in the ground, and it was inside of the bricks, okay? It was in the bricks. And the story always went, because a lot of our history comes from word of mouth, because a lot of people have passed away. And the story always went that Sarah's name was on the back of it. Come over here and show you. Once we got it up, y'all imagine that day. We waited and waited and waited, and look at the back. Her name is not there. And that's what the family had thought for years, y'all. They were out here, oh, where's Sarah? So we know she's here. She should be here somewhere. Now, we don't know if her marker made it through a lot of the things that happened, okay? Because it could be just like that marker. It's somewhere completely different that we may find. But the family says that they still believe, because they were always told that it's in the plot, that it was snatched down. So we just thought, well, we were told that her name was on the back of there, but it's not. So there's another piece missing in here somewhere. So the family is gonna have to do a whole nother process, approve of us doing it. But what we want to do eventually, that's a part of our master plan. So just to quickly explain, our master plan was done by a group called the expert team. the executive planning and review team. And it's a team of African American stakeholders that are involved in, that have some kind of fight, dog in the races, just like the way I like to say it. Whether you're a history teacher, or you're advocate for African American rights, all these different groups of people that are just from the East End community. We pulled all these people together and we built a team of people, because Enrichmond Foundation at the time was ran by a white man. His name is John Sidner. So of course it's then called a white-led organization. And what he felt at the time, he did not deem it fair for a white man to make the primary decisions of this cemetery. So that's why he helped build that team. And he actually just picked a couple people and said, you know what, you all are better equipped to build this team. And that's what you want. You want more people to make these kind of decisions, so the wrong decisions aren't made, okay? So yeah, so that's the expert team. And so what they came up with, it took about 2 years, and a very expensive plan, like right at 20 million. But you gotta think, if it took 50 years to tear this joker up, you know what I'm saying, over 100-year cemetery, it's gonna take just as long and resources to get it back to where it used to be. So this is one of the things that's a part of that plan, is to bring these historical markers, all markers, but definitely the historical markers first, and reset them so we can see how many of these stories are real and how many are, really what it is. So that's Miss Sarah's grave. I wanted to take a chance to show you all African Americans, some of them believed that conch shells captured bad spirits. And so you have this family here that we definitely believed in it, because you have your conch shells throughout the property, and you have them all the way around here. They're engraved in the outer burial containers. So, and even throughout the cemetery, the more you look around and get into the older parts, there are conch shells everywhere. And so I don't know if you all ever noticed the sign that says no relic hunting, because they will come. And I saw one lady one time, y'all, she had a basket. And I was like, what is that she has in her hand? And I went to her, and there were bottles in there and conch shells. And I said, ma'am, I said, those are historical to the space. She did not know. You'll think a lot of things that you think people, I didn't know before I started. I didn't know. So I told her, I said, look, no problem. She said, I'll take them back. So that's why we have it here now, because a lot of people don't realize that the stuff that's here, you never know why a person left that with their family. So guys, we also have, come on down for me. This is John Mitchell Jr.'s grave. He was a prominent newspaper editor, politician, banker, and civil rights activist. He was born enslaved near Richmond. Mitchell attended the Richmond Colored Normal School and taught for a year before he and other black teachers were fired by a new Democratic school board. He then went into journalism in 1884, becoming editor of the Richmond Planet, an African-American weekly newspaper. Mitchell used the Planet to promote civil rights, racial justice, and racial pride. As an editor and activist, he became a key figure in the anti-lynching movement and played an instrumental role in organizing the Richmond streetcar boycott of 1904. Mitchell's bold protests against racial injustice, which at times included calls to take up arms in self-defense, earned him his reputation as the fighting editor. In addition to his work on the Richmond Planet, Mitchell served on the Richmond City Council from 1888 to 1896 before founding the Mechanics Saving Bank in 1901. His work at the bank brought him more into the political and social mainstream, but its collapse in 1922 led him to be convicted on charges of fraud and theft. The conviction was later overturned but left him destitute. When the state Republican Party excluded most black delegates from its convention, Mitchell unsuccessfully ran for governor on a lily black ticket. He remained editor of the Richmond Planet until his death in 1929. So just really cool, fun fact, which I think is always important when you have family members who are passing stories down. You Here's the fighting editor, right? Something we should always remember with history is that a lot of time it's been glamorized, okay? You're not really getting what really happened. Mr. Mitchell has explained to us that although they call him the fighting editor, the family didn't see it that way because, as you see, he was destitute because he was charged for things that at the time they know he didn't do. But the point is we want to we want your money. And because that's going to stop you from being able to have the pool that you need to get things done. So it made the family like really afraid to do those things later because look at what it did to our family. So it just goes to show you that it's really good. History is so important, but it's the most important when you're really hearing it from the source, because you can take these glamorized history notes and say, well, we know a real part of what happened because this is how the community saw him, which was amazing. But the family had a real feel of what it did to their family to be a person to stand up and fight back. So it really took a lot of courage to be that person. So really proud of him for that. Just really quick, I always think it's amazing. I was telling y'all how heavy the iron is. I want everybody to take your hands and just lift up on the iron a little bit, just so you can get a feel for how, come on over, Jason. I think they've felt it before. So you can get a feel, just barely lift it. You can see how heavy it is. That's why they took this metal and got cash for it, because a person with a habit, this is a good little amount of, few dollars. So it shows you, it gives you a very good, when you get to hold that metal, it shows you the history and the love put into this place as well, because y'all, the people in this area, they had good money. They had that good money, okay? So we're gonna go to our last stop on the tour, guys. And this is Miss Maggie Walker's grave. Miss Maggie Lena Walker was an African-American entrepreneur and civic leader who broke traditional gender and discriminatory laws by becoming the first woman, white or black, to establish and become president of a bank in the U.S., the St. Luke Penny Savings Bank in Richmond. As of 2010, when it was known as Consolidated Bank and Trust Company, it was the oldest continually African-American operated bank in the U.S. In her role as Grand Secretary of the Independent Order of St. Luke, Walker was also indispensable in organizing a variety of enterprises that advanced the African-American community while expanding the public role of women. Although as an African-American woman in the post-Civil War South, she faced social, economic, and political barriers in her life and business ventures. Walker's, by encouraging investment and collective action, achieved tangible improvements for African Americans. So, Ms. Walker mainly believed, let's pull our money together. We can get a lot of great stuff done if we pull our money together. She worked with and lived in the same area as Mr. Mitchell's family. Another fun fact is the Black History Museum. The building that they're in now was actually built, the elevator system, by Maggie Walker's husband. So that's really cool. And they've redone that building, but all of the elevator system, most in the Jackson Ward area, were done by Maggie Walker's husband. So you have a family plot here. You have a lot of different headstones. One that I think is really cool is the one that's over here off by itself. And you have a marker here with no words and no names on it. So one of the oldest living relatives of the Walker family, Mr. Mickens, he told us that that's a baby's plot. And that a lot of the time, children and young children and babies were not buried with the family. So you have them over here. And I asked him if he knew why. He said, I don't know why, but that was a thing. Okay, so, and when he said it, it touched the nerve, because I knew that he knew what he was talking about, because you all know that area you drove in on the curb. Right after you leave the curb on the right-hand side in the back right corner, we were volunteering there one day. And so the volunteer was like, hey, I found some rocks. So they showed me 2 or 3 rocks. Well, the first 1 or 2 was like, okay. And then it's like, oh, it's a lot of them. And I was like, wait, let me get over here. So I had the volunteers start cutting higher so I can see what it was. There were little circles of white rocks. And so it was a children's grave over by itself. So that validated what he told me, like, oh, they were sometimes buried by themselves. Although we don't know why, we know that that kind of thing happened. And it was a lot of beliefs that led, you know, throughout history that make people do the things they do. We don't always know why. But what we do know is that this cemetery is extremely special and sacred. And our goal as volunteers, our goal as, the cost of being on this earth is to help other people. Like, you know, you can do a lot of stuff for yourself, but if you can just take out a few minutes and just help somebody else, whether it's opening the door. I tell my sons all the time, do what you can to help people. Don't always think about yourself, because it can change your life inside. It has completely changed my life to be able to help people, and I'm blessed to be a part of an organization that allows me to come back out and work with so many great people, including the volunteers and the descendants of this sacred place. So I'm very thankful that you all took the time with me today to join the tour. Do I have any questions? Do anybody have any questions about the tour today? All right, well, thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time. Thank you.